We have 3 Thanksgiving games per usual, but also the Friday game that we are going to go through and talk about. So important that we get these rankings correct early in the week for you. Tier 1, we will have Tyreek Hill. With Tyreek, horrible matchup against the Jets. The worst matchup you could ask for. But what do you want from me? He's Tyreek Hill. He's the Christian McCaffrey, the wide receiver position. He's going to be tier 1 every single week, regardless of the matchup. Dropping down to tier 2, CeeDee Lamb. Beautiful spot going up against Washington. We know that Washington has given up some massive performances to opposing wide receivers so far this season. Lamb's averaging about 21.5 points per game. And the Dallas Cowboys have the highest implied team total of any team in the NFL this week with almost 30 points according to Vegas sportsbooks. Amon-Ra St. Brown will come in at 3. The Lions are right up there as well with a 27-point implied team total, playing the Packers on Thanksgiving. Amon-Ra averaging 21.5 points per game. Super safe option. A.J. Brown at 4. While I understand, yes, A.J. Brown did not give you anything against the Chiefs in a primetime Monday game where I'm sure everybody's pissed. He's still A.J. Brown. He's still averaging about 20.5 points per game. This game is at the very top of the NFL with its over-under. You have the Philadelphia Eagles with an implied team total of 25.5 points. I want pieces in this game going up against Buffalo. Stefon Diggs will be our next guy in that same game with Stefon Diggs. Coming off a brutal matchup against the Jets. Should be much better this week. And then Keenan Allen, last but not least in this tier, actually ahead of everybody else here in points per game. My issue with Keenan Allen is it is just a brutal matchup going up against the Baltimore Ravens. But if you look at the underdog pick'ems, right now Keenan Allen at 87.5 receiving yards, Stefon Diggs at 83.5. If you're looking at Amon-Ra St. Brown at 81.5. So yeah, if you're looking at the underdog pick'ems this week, they would say CeeDee Lamb's going to continue to do CeeDee Lamb things. He should be at the very top of this tier. I just think it's a really tough matchup where the Chargers have the lowest implied team total of any offense in this tier. Now, Puka will be our next wide receiver at 7. This is a statement ranking, ladies and gentlemen. I just want to rank Puka in a range where you know to start him, regardless of if Cooper Kupp's going to play or not. Now, of course, if Cooper Kupp plays, Puka will be lower than this in these rankings. If Kupp misses, this is probably where Puka slides in. Mike Evans will be our next guy. I mean, I don't know how long this season could go on where I say, oh, okay, well, Godwin and Evans have a consistent amount of volume. I mean, they should be about the same with your expectations. And every single week, Mike Evans goes, I don't care about the projections. I have no idea how many times Evans has gone over his underdog projection. Right now, it's at 61.5 receiving yards, where it looks like we're just going to get the continued trend all year where Evans does more with the same amount that Godwin gets. Jefferson will be our next guy at 9. With Jefferson, you actually have a 23-point implied team total for the Minnesota Vikings. Great matchup against Chicago. The question is, does he play? Obviously, if he plays, he's higher than this in the rankings. But I did want to rank him a little bit lower just to make sure that people look at it sideways and go, okay, is there something going on? And the thing that's going on is I have no idea if he's going to play or not. Now, Brandon Ayuk will be our next wide receiver here, also playing on Sunday night. Now, if you're looking at the underdog pick'em, you have Ayuk at 63.5 receiving yards. I would actually say my favorite underdog pick'em of the week this week is going to be Brock Purdy for fewer than half an interception. I just don't think they have to aggressively throw the ball in the second half. And of course, if you wanted to check out any of those pick'ems, you can actually get a more than less than half a total yard for Christian McCaffrey in this offense for that Thursday night game. And promo code FLOCK's going to give you that special pick'em plus a 100% deposit match and my rest of season fantasy football rankings and tiers. Now, dropping down to our next guy, we'll be looking at Jamar Chase at 11. With Chase, obviously, it is a tough spot when you have no Joe Burrow. I'm going to be ranking Chase and Adams back to back. I think that they are both in very similar situations. I think that they are both top-level talents at the wide receiver position. Better talents than anybody else in this tier. The issue is they also have the worst quarterback play than anybody else in this tier as well. So that is going to cap their ceiling overall, where you only have a 16.5 point implied team total for the Bengals this week and a 17-point implied team total for the Raiders. Obviously, Tank Dell rounding us out here at 13, though, is going to be in a much better offense. Almost 24 points is the projection for this Texans offense this week. Going up against Jacksonville should be a higher scoring game overall. Underdog pick'ems have Tank Dell at 64.5 receiving yards. One thing that I want to monitor is if Noah Brown's going to play or not, because if you have no Noah Brown in this game, I wouldn't fault you if you wanted to go out there and actually move Tank Dell up to, I want to say, probably wide receiver 8-ish in this range. Now, dropping down to our next tier, we will go with DJ Moore at 14. If you're looking at DJ Moore, continues to dominate the market share in Chicago. The Chicago offense, with or without Justin Fields, is never going to be a good passing offense. I think everybody has learned that the hard way by now. But it doesn't matter if DJ Moore is going out there and if he's managing to see 35% of this team's receiving yardage total every single week. It's nuts, but he's able to overcome how bad the offense is. And also, the offense is actually pretty high with their implied team total this week compared to what it usually is. Adam Thielen will be our next guy in here. Adam Thielen, another one of these wide receivers that is just dominant despite the offenses. So you see 4 key guys all in the same range, right? DJ Moore, Adam Thielen, Jamar Chase, Devontae Adams. These are all wide receivers that are dominating with volume, that have horrendous quarterback play. We're just going to go with Chase and Adams in the tier above because I believe that they are the better talents between this group. Now, Michael Pittman will be our next guy at 16. With Pittman, he was my 3rd most drafted receiver this year, I want to say. So obviously, I'm going to continue to root for him heavily. Underdog has his pick him at 64.5 receiving yards this week. We'll talk about downs a little later on. And Chris Olave will come in at 17. With Olave, he's been worse than almost everybody else in this tier, at least everybody ahead of him, right? He's only averaging 14 points per game. Now you have Michael Thomas going on the IR, so it looks like it's an easier spot to expect that Olave goes out and sees a considerable amount of target volume in this offense. But the offense is just struggling overall. You do have almost a 21-point implied team total against Atlanta, though. Devonta Smith will be our next guy in here at 18. With Smith, I actually want to have him higher than this. And honestly, I'm going to put him higher than this. We talked about him being that buy low candidate last week, given the fact that you do just have an expanded role in games where Dallas Goedert does not play for Devonta Smith. Now, our next guy will be Cooper Kupp at 19. This is a ranking saying I have no idea if Cooper Kupp's going to play or not. What I do know is if Cooper Kupp does play, you should probably have Cooper Kupp in your starting lineup going up against the Arizona Cardinals, where the Rams are supposed to score about 22 points here. Now, with that being said, at the same time, I mean, obviously, he's not had a good game in 5 weeks. So if you wanted to go through and bench him, even if he does play, and wait to see what we have next week, I mean, you do you. You can if you want. Now, dropping down to our next tier, we're going to go Jalen Waddle at 20. I mean, I have nothing against Waddle. I would love for him to come out and do better than this because he was our most drafted receiver last year. He won us a considerable amount of money last season. It's just this year, for whatever reason, despite this offense being so damn good, he's at 13.5 points per game. Plus, this is a game going up against the New York Jets. We're just about the hardest matchup you could possibly ask for. Garrett Wilson will be in here at 21. And finally, Zach Wilson is benched. But at the same time, you're now looking at Tim Boyle stepping in and this still being the worst offense in the NFL. You have a 15-point implied team total going up against the Miami Dolphins here. Spread on this game is 10 points, so it's very difficult to get excited about anybody in New York. Deebo Samuel will be our next guy in 22. I understand Deebo doesn't really do anything this past week. You have Brandon Ayuk and Kittle continuing to dominate. I think that Deebo, probably one of these more volatile options. I honestly think all these guys will be volatile in this offense this season just because you have so many weapons. There's no way that every single one of these guys has a great week every single week, or Purdy's going to be the MVP. Nico Collins coming in at 23. This is really going to be dependent on Noah Brown, right? Noah Brown does not play. You can move Nico Collins to the top of this tier as well. I mean, obviously, great offense. If you do look at the target volume, however, the past 5 weeks, Tank Dell has clearly cemented himself as the wide receiver 1 for Houston. Christian Kirk will be the next guy in at 24, and we'll go Calvin Ridley at 25 as well. So I know after the massive week that we had from Calvin Ridley last week, everybody's going to be screaming at me in the comment section going, Mason, you clown, you need to go through and you need to rank Calvin Ridley higher than this. I mean, I understand the thought process, right? I understand he has the name appeal. I understand that he has multiple massive spike weeks. Still, at the end of the day, he's only averaging 12.5 points. So if you're averaging 12.5 points per game, it's hard to be super excited, even if the splits with and without Zay Jones are encouraging. And obviously, if you were looking at that one statistic, it would tell you that when Zay Jones plays, you rank Calvin Ridley as the wide receiver 1. I'm just not ready to do it, to be honest. Give me one more week and let's expand this sample a little bit longer. Now, our next guy will be DeAndre Hopkins at 26, going up against Carolina. Carolina actually doesn't allow a ton of points to opposing wide receivers. I think the primary reason is, really, you're not going to be expecting too many shootouts against the Panthers, right? Bryce Young cannot effectively move the ball down the field. This is typically a team that's going to allow a ton of rushing yards. I think it's more so going to be a Derrick Henry week this week. We'll go Jordan Addison at 27. Now, very difficult to rank these Minnesota guys, right? Because obviously, if Justin Jefferson plays, it's going to be very difficult to start Jordan Addison, knowing that Joshua Dobbs is probably going to look at Jefferson 1, Hockenson 2, and then run the ball 3, then lastly, Jordan Addison. But if you have no Justin Jefferson going up against Chicago with the 23-point implied team total, I would really like to start Jordan Addison there. Now, Hollywood Brown will be our next wide receiver at 28. We have Hollywood as a buy low candidate this week. And that, while I understand over the past 2 weeks, the man's sitting with like a total of 30 receiving yards, 30 total yards. And it's been absolutely horrendous since Kyler's come back in. But nonetheless, the implied team total is almost about 23 points. Vegas is telling us it's going to be a good offense overall. And if you do look at Hollywood's underdog pick'em as well, they have Hollywood Brown hovering around 51, 52 and a half receiving yards. Chris Godwin will come in here at 29. Godwin, it's just frustrating, right? Because all season now, this guy has gotten a volume. It's been consistent as well. But for whatever reason, he's just not doing anything with the volume this year. If you looked at what was going on in Tampa, I would just assume, okay, Godwin's the guy that was drafted in 2014. Evans the guy that was drafted in 2017, right? But clearly it's just not the case. DK Metcalf, I know everybody's probably screaming in the comment section, oh my God, he forgot Metcalf. I did not. Metcalf missed practice on Tuesday. Not only did he miss practice on Tuesday, but we don't know the full extent of the Geno Smith injury. And at the same time, you're going up against the 49ers. So you're looking at your quarterback being banged up. You're looking at the receiver being banged up. And you are looking at one of the worst, and I repeat, worst matchups you could possibly ask for. So yeah, I'm just not about DK Metcalf this week in particular. Terry McLaurin will be our next guy. With Terry McLaurin, tough matchup as well on Thanksgiving, going up against the Dallas Cowboys. Right now, you have an applied team total of about 18.5 points for Washington. Obviously, you can say, well, Mason, come on, man. They're just going to go out there and they're going to throw the ball 50 times, and McLaurin can rack up some garbage time numbers, which, so if you wanted to have him higher than this, you can. Right now, they actually have his touchdown line on Underdog as a 2x for him to score a touchdown, though. So instead of going through and looking to start him, I'd just say, okay, if you're that excited, I say he's going to score a touchdown, but there's a reason why you're getting 2x there. It's not super likely. Drake London will be our next guy here at 32 with London. Consistent. You have an applied team total of almost 22 points. So just know, if we're going to go through and start Drake London, expect Jonnu Smith to have 300 receiving yards. And Courtland Sutton, I know another one of these guys, people are probably very frustrated asking, where is he? He's going up against the Cleveland Browns. You have an 18.5 point implied team total for the Denver Broncos here. And if you were looking at Courtland Sutton, it's not like he's been great from a fantasy points per game perspective. He's averaging about 13.5 points per game. And he's doing so while being at the very top of the league in touchdown rate. The most volatile statistic, the statistics that's going to be hardest to predict from a week-to-week perspective. Sutton is leading in it, so I'm expecting a natural Sutton pullback, and at the same time, brutal matchup. Lockett will be our next guy at 34. Injured quarterback, tough spot against the 49ers. Zay Flowers, 35, will be interesting, right? Because if you are looking at Zay Flowers here, this is a wide receiver that now may see an expanded target share with no Mark Andrews in this offense. I know maybe that doesn't sound like it should be the case. If you look at Mark Andrews, Zay Flowers, couldn't be farther apart. But ultimately, I'm not expecting us to have the same amount of targets going to Isaiah Likely as what we previously had for Mark Andrews. I think this disperses a little bit around the entire offense. Amari Cooper will be the next guy at 36. If you're looking at Amari, this is a wide receiver that is just in one of the worst offenses in the NFL. You have an applied team total of 16 points here for the Cleveland Browns. Deontay Johnson, speaking of one of the worst offenses in the NFL, finally freed from Matt Canada. Let's see what happens. But ultimately, you have about a 17.5 point implied team total. So he's also at the very bottom of the league. His underdog pick him, though, is at 50.5 receiving yards. So they are projecting him to be okay. T. Higgins at 38, horrible offense. The second wide receiver in said offense. And then Josh Downs at 39. You'd honestly make an argument to go ahead and have Josh Downs ahead of T. Higgins, and that you have about a 7-point difference with their implied team total. I don't know. It's so hard for me to get out there and make that move. I hope Josh Downs is a much bigger week than T. Higgins this week, with Downs being my second most drafted wide receiver this season. But, it's hard for me to ever go out here and rank Josh Downs over T. Higgins, so we at least see what Higgins looks like in this offense with no Burrow. But I'm not expecting it to be pretty. But I think that's all I have for y'all. If y'all enjoyed the video, please go down there, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you play fantasy football. And of course, if you wanted to check out any of those pick'ems we talked about in this video, my favorite would be Brock Purdy for fewer than half an interception. You can find that link in the live chat description comment section. Promo code FLOG, 100% deposit match, plus our rest of season fantasy football rankings and tiers, and that Christian McCaffrey special pick on more than less than half a total yard. But thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. I really do appreciate you. Really hope you have a great day, and really hope we get to see you out in a live stream later tonight.